New Orleans, 1919. A night in March. The sound of jazz travels the streets as if it were the city's own blood. Trombones, clarinets, and pianos echo across every corner, every alleyway, every illuminated window. But this is no ordinary night of celebration. It is a night of terror. Entire families crowd together in living rooms, sweating, playing instruments they barely know how to hold. Neighbors gather in houses, improvising amateur bands. The jazz clubs are so packed that people watch from outside the windows just to make sure the music does not stop. Because tonight, music is the only thing separating the living from the dead. There is a demon loose in New Orleans, a demon who writes letters, a demon who sends ultimatums, and according to his own words, only jazz can save them. But who is this demon? Is he a man? Is he truly a supernatural entity? Or is he something far more terrifying, something human, hidden behind a mask of madness and mythology? Today, we dive into one of the most disturbing, mysterious, and cinematic cases in American criminal history. A story of blood, jazz, paranoia, and a killer who simply vanished. This is the story of the Axeman, the dark side of New Orleans' golden age. To understand the terror that consumed New Orleans, we must first understand the city itself. And in 1918, New Orleans wasn't just a city. It was a boiling cauldron of fear, disease, and change. The air hung heavy with the smells of molasses, river mud, and sweat. A humid oppression that made locking windows on a hot night a death sentence in itself. World War I was coming to an end, but its echoes still reverberated through the streets. Soldiers were returning home, many mutilated, many traumatized. The city tried to return to normal, but there was something in the air that prevented it, something invisible yet deadly. The Spanish flu pandemic. Imagine a disease that killed the young and healthy within days. People went to sleep well and woke up dead. Hospitals were overwhelmed. Families buried their loved ones in mass graves. The fear of death became as common as breakfast bread. And it was in this apocalyptic setting that the Axeman chose to make his debut. The neighborhoods where the crimes occurred were predominantly inhabited by Italian immigrants and Italian Americans, working-class families, small grocery store owners, barbers, people who came to America looking for the dream but found the nightmare. You see, at that time, being Italian in New Orleans meant being automatically suspect. This prejudice wasn't new. We must remember the city's grim history. The brutal anti-Italian mass lynching of 1891 proved that this community could be attacked with impunity. The police were historically ineffective and corrupt, often happy to blame the immigrant community. This institutional failure would be the Axeman's greatest ally.
Before the Maggios attack, the police should have been alerted. In September 1917, months before the Maggios, an Italian immigrant named Rosie Troncina was brutally attacked in her sleep with an axe. The victim was struck 4 times in the head, and her husband, Joe, survived with a fractured skull. Though the police dismissed the case as a domestic dispute, the modus operandi was chillingly familiar. A break-in through a back door, a sharp weapon found at the scene, and a sole focus on Italian merchants. But the city chose to look the other way. And so the stage was set when the official terror began. May 23rd, 1918. Pre-dawn. Joseph Maggio was a simple man. They had no reason to suspect it would be the last night of their lives. But someone was watching. As the city slept, a figure approached. He walked to the backyard, where he found what he was looking for, an axe. Joseph Maggio's axe, about to become an instrument of death. He walked up the stairs. Joseph and Catherine were sound asleep when the first blow fell. The killer used the blunt end of the axe. He wanted to crush, to mutilate. Catherine woke up, but it was too late. He took a razor. Some reports state it was Joseph's own shaving razor, and cut Catherine's throat so fiercely that he nearly decapitated her. And then he simply left. He dropped the axe on the floor, left the razor beside the bodies. The scene was gruesome. The police were quick to arrest Joseph's brothers, Jake and Andrew, based on an assumption of a family feud. But investigators found something more chilling in the home. A bathtub completely filled with blood, which the killer may have used to wash himself before fleeing. The police quickly cleaned the scene, destroying critical evidence in their haste. But then, something strange was discovered. Mrs. Maggio is going to sit tonight just like Mrs. Tony. Mrs. Tony was a reference to an old case from 1911 where an Italian woman had been similarly murdered. The killer was never caught. The message was clear. This was not a crime of passion. It wasn't family revenge. It was something much bigger. It was the beginning of a series.
June 27th, 1918, 1 month after the Maggios. Louis Besumer, a Polish merchant, lived with his mistress, Harriet Lowe, in an apartment above his grocery store. The axeman entered the same way. Panel removed, axe from the backyard. Deadly silence. Besumer and Harriet were attacked in their sleep. Both survived, but only temporarily. And this is where the story took a sinister turn. Harriet Lowe, delirious in the hospital, accused Besumer of being the axeman. She claimed he was a German spy. The police, desperate for a suspect, arrested Besumer. Besumer, a Polish immigrant, was now charged with the attack. The public demanded swift justice, regardless of the facts. But while Besumer was in jail, The attacks continued. August 10th, 1918, Joseph Romano. In the early hours, the girls heard a noise. They found Joseph on the floor, and then they saw him. A tall, heavy-set figure, wearing a dark suit and a slouch hat. The description was useless. Joseph Romano died 2 days later. The city realized something terrifying. There was no stopping him. March 10th, 1919. The terror escalated further. The Cortemelia family was attacked. Charles Cortemelia, his wife Rosie, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sarah. The killer entered the same way, chisel and axe. Charles was killed instantly. Rosie and little Sarah were also brutally struck. When police arrived, Rosie Cortemelia, despite her grave injuries, was holding her deceased daughter in her arms. The community's despair was exploited by the police. They arrested 2 men, Frank Giordano and his son, for the crime. Rosie initially identified them, but later recanted her testimony, stating police pressure had led her to lie. Despite her retraction, Frank Giordano was convicted of Charles Cortemelia's murder. The system preferred a neat solution over the truth. Justice was blind, and the true killer was still free. Months passed. The attacks subsided, but he hadn't. He was just waiting for the right moment to make the most audacious move of all.
March 13th, 1919. The editors of the Times-Picayune newspaper received a strange letter. The letter began, "Hell, March 13th, 1919. Editors of the Times-Picayune, New Orleans, Louisiana." And then, in a tone that mixed megalomania, sadism, and a morbid humor, the author introduced himself. "They have never caught me, and never will. I am not a human being, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell. I am what you, Orleanians, and your foolish police call the Axeman." The letter was a masterpiece of psychological terror. It was written in the highly literate hand of someone with an education, but filled with the dark mythology of a sadist. This was not merely a random killer. This was a showman. He was mocking the city, seizing control of the narrative, proving that his weapon was not the axe, but the paralyzing fear of the unknown. Now, to be exact, at 12:15 a.m. on the morning of March 19th, I shall pass over New Orleans. In my infinite passage, I shall leave unprotected those who mean me no harm. But if I find a jazz band playing in a home, I shall pass by that house. He was issuing an ultimatum: play jazz or die. The letter ended with a warning. Those who do not heed this warning, keep your doors locked and your windows shut, and you will see. When the newspaper published the letter, the city plunged into mass hysteria. The connection to jazz was particularly unsettling. Jazz, at the time, was still seen as many as the devil's music. It was music of brothels, of dingy bars, of people considered immoral, And now, ironically, this profane music was the only salvation. The days leading up to March 19th were a blur of frantic preparation. Music stores sold out, instruments became scarce, and composers, ever opportunistic, saw a chance. A song was written, the mysterious Axeman's jazz, "Don't Scare Me, Papa." And then the night arrived, March 19th, 1919. If you could travel back in time, you would witness something surreal. Every house, every apartment, every corner of the city was playing jazz. Trombones wailing, clarinets screaming, pianos pounding, all in a symphonic chaos of fear and hope. And as the city danced on the brink of madness, the Axeman did nothing. He simply didn't show up. He was laughing at how he managed to turn an entire city into his puppets. But the story didn't end there, because a few months later, the Axeman would break his own agreement.
October 27th, 1919. Mike Pepitone, an Italian merchant, was attacked in his home. His wife, Esther, woke up to the noise and saw a figure fleeing. Mike was the last confirmed victim of the Axeman. And then the terror simply stopped. No explanation, no warning. The Axeman vanished as mysteriously as he had appeared. But the story gained a final chapter, a chapter that even today divides opinions. In December 1920, a man named Joseph Momfrey was shot dead in Los Angeles. Who killed him? Esther Pepitone, Mike's widow. She claimed Momfrey was the Axeman, that he had killed her husband, that she had traveled to Los Angeles to take justice into her own hands. The story is compelling, but the facts are murky. Police investigated Momfrey, who had a criminal record for violence. However, no evidence ever definitively linked him to the New Orleans murders, and his former associates strongly denied the connection. Esther was convicted of manslaughter, but served only 3 years in prison. Many Orleanians considered her a hero, and many still believe that Momfrey was the Axeman, finally brought to justice by a grieving wife. She died in 1934, taking the truth with her. And so ends the confirmed murder spree of the Axeman of New Orleans. Or perhaps it doesn't end, because the truth is we may never know who he really was. The theories abound. Was it a mafia hitman operating outside of the usual rules, focused on Italian targets? Unlikely, given the bizarre theater of the jazz letter. Was it a lone, sexually motivated killer, like the theory surrounding a local musician named Leon Herzog, who was committed to an asylum shortly after the attacks ended? Or was it truly a demon, as he himself claimed, who decided to return to hell when he tired of terrifying mortals?
What we do know is this. Between 1918 and 1919, someone spread absolute terror across one of America's most vibrant cities. Someone who understood the power
of fear, mythology, and spectacle. Someone who used the city's prejudice and police incompetence as his cover. Someone who turned jazz, the music of freedom, into a tool for survival. And the case remains unsolved. The removed panel, the axe left behind, the demon's letter, the night of jazz, the bloody bathtub, all of it became legend, and legends, as we know, never die. They just wait, in the dark, for someone brave enough to reopen the case. Sometimes, the only thing between you and terror is a jazz song playing in the dark. So, tell me, who do you think the Axeman was? Leave your theories in the comments below. Was it mafia revenge, a hate crime, an ordinary serial killer, or something supernatural? If you made it this far, thank you for walking with me through this dark case. If you enjoyed this dive into the cold archives of New Orleans, please leave a like. It helps the channel continue bringing these forgotten stories to light. And if you want more unsolved cases, more mysteries that defy explanation, subscribe to the Unsolved Echoes. Because every week we go back to the archives. We go back to the dark alleys of history, and we try to hear the echoes that time could not silence. Until the next case.